Welcome to this Gated Bridleless Start lecture with myself, Carrie, all about the Icelandic mare Limra and how we're starting her under saddle bridleless. So I'm creating this video because so far we've posted 4 training videos where we've shown our first sessions, how we're starting to introduce control at liberty. And week 5 in this process deteriorated, and this has actually continued to be on and off a theme in regards to some weeks I don't get to train Limra. And this is partly just my expectations versus reality. I love to set very grand goals, and when I first envisioned this project, I'm like, I'm gonna train her every week. And of course, in week 5, I was sick. And of course, since then, we're also quite a bit behind some of the videos. If you've been following closely, you'll notice that I haven't produced all the videos that I had planned quite at the rate that I had planned to produce them at. And this is just because coordinating filming and video editing with our really full schedule, working with different weather changes and different situations in our barn, has created a scenario where there are gaps in Limra's training. There are weeks where she sits due to a variety of different reasons. And I have to admit, I went through periods of time where I had a little bit of an emotional crisis about this because I'm very committed to this project, and it's hard to not see perfection, right? I can definitely have that perfectionist trait. But as I've discussed more with Terrell and Anna and my many other colleagues, I think that this lack of perfection has actually been a blessing in many ways. And this is primarily because Limra is actually quite young. So she was born in 2019, which makes her only 3.5 years old, particularly at the start of this project. She turns 4 this summer. And that is a normal time for us to start our youngsters, but it is very young. And as I started to work with her, I realized that there are some developmental considerations that we need to be keeping in mind as we progress with this project. My goal for Limra is for her to be functional and healthy in this project and as a riding horse for years and years to come. And with her young age and the fact that liberty involves circling, that can strain her joints. And I want to recognize the fact that she will not fully mature until she's 8 years old. We know horses, especially the growth plates higher up in their limbs, don't close till around 7 or 8 in many cases. And Terrell and I have witnessed this as we've started hundreds of horses through the years, that as they get older and older, they grow. We actually have seen horses grow several inches between 3.5 and 8 years old, especially as they muscle and develop under saddle. And so I need to be considerate that we are in this growth period right now with Limra. And movement is good. We found, with thoroughbreds, for example, they're less likely to be injured if they're raised on a pasture and out and moving around. And Limra had that upbringing thanks to Jane Thomas, her breeder. And here at our farm, she's turned out daily and gets to run and has friends and be out on a big pasture. And I think training movement can also be good. It can help her start to build muscling and agility. So I think movement is good, but we do want to be conscientious of where she's at developmentally and consider that when we consider duration of sessions, frequency of sessions within a week and within this entire year. I mentioned before, we do generally start, and Unfortunately, there are some misconceptions about this in the Icelandic horse community. We do generally start horses around 3.5 to 4 years old. You'll hear some rumors that they wait in Iceland till they're like 5 years old to start them, and that has not been my experience working at multiple large breeding farms in Iceland. However, traditionally with Icelandic horses, we usually start them for about 6 weeks to 3 months. And we just do an initial start where the goal is basic speed and directional control, ability to ride from A to B in the arena and maybe a little outside. And they understand the bridle, they understand the rider's cues, and they're comfortable carrying the rider. But there's no gait training, there's no dressage training. It's just kind of getting them moving forward and happy carrying a person. And usually after that time period, in most scenarios, most breeders, and Terrell and I recommend giving a long break. So with many youngsters, we'll then wait 6 months to a year after that initial training. And it's at that point that we start to really school the horse. We start to control their gaits, teach them to tolt if they need to be developed and tolt under saddle, or balance out all 5 gaits if they show all 5 gaits naturally. So from there, we gradually transition from the intro to gait training into just long-term development, which is just lifelong training. And throughout this process, one of the things I love about Icelandic horsemanship is we have this focus on riding outside of the arena and riding forward in straight lines, which can be a lot less strain and stress on joints and tendons than riding on a lot of circles. Even here at our farm, we don't have a lot of access to trails, but you'll see Terrell and Anna and myself very oftentimes ride in the arena and then go out and blast up and down the driveway or around some of our front fields, so that our horses are getting to experience that moving forward in straight stretches. This is, of course, going to be challenging with a bridleless start and with liberty training. But the good news is that although liberty training does involve circles, the sessions tend to be shorter. If looking back at my sessions so far with Limra, some of them are only 10 to 12 minutes. And even the longest one, I think, so far has been about 45 minutes. So these sessions are not long or super intense. Most of them, she's not working up a sweat. She's not really physically straining herself very much. And the other neat thing about Liberty that I think is a positive, considering what we've just discussed, is that I've discovered that with this approach to Liberty training, oftentimes I can let my Liberty horses, I've experienced this with Cookie, my Liberty pony, I can let him sit for a month and not touch any of his Liberty work. And I pull him out of the field, I put him in the arena, and it's like we start exactly where we left off. So there's something really neat about Liberty training, and that horses seem to retain the training very, very well. And I will say that has been my experience with Limra so far. When we've had a break, she's been able to pick up right where we left off. And of course, there are circles, as we've discussed at Liberty, and that's a big part of Liberty training. So there might not be much we can do to change that. However, I think that does speak to the necessity of breaks. So although the perfectionist Carrie is like, we should train all the time, I think it's actually been a good thing that Limra has had intermittent weeks off. And I think it's also important to consider that at this stage, while she's so young, the focus needs to be on the mental side of things and less so on the physical side. Kind of like our general focus in our more regular par for the course starting of youngsters, where my goal this year should be just simply getting her comfortable with a rider up on her back, getting some basic speed and directional control, and not really getting too far into micromanaging movement or getting really intense on the physical side of things. And then finally, I do think that it is okay for 1 or 2 sessions to go a little long, but really sticking to the principle of keeping short sessions this first year is going to be key going forward. So these are just some things that, as I've had the opportunity to process and work on this project, that I've come to some conclusions on.